So practically now in the last session, we were trying to see that if you have to use Ansible to do something more complex, not just a simple ad hoc commands that you have to run, that is when you will be using playbooks. So playbooks is nothing but the step-by-step or the ordered process of what we have to do through which the automation can be done, in which you will be trying to give all the modules based on which you will be defining what is the state of the machine that we have to maintain. So that is what we were trying to see as a playbook. And generally playbook will be written in a format called as YAML format, right? So in the YAML format, any file that we have to store, we will be storing it using the extension called as .yml. That is what we were seeing in the last class. Again, just to give an overview, when you start writing anything in a YAML format, you have to begin with 3 hyphen, and then you should always follow a indentation with respect to the space, and the spaces has to follow exactly for all the elements that is there under a particular group. So that is how for each value that you are going to give, it has to be in a key and a value pair, where you will say the name of the key colon followed by a space and the value whatever that you have to assign. Okay, so in that, the first thing that what we saw is, now in a playbook we can basically divide a playbook into 3 or more sections, where the major section, what we will be classifying it into target section, variable section, and task section. So target section is a section where we will be basically defining what exactly is the machine to use and how it is to be used. And in the variable section, we will be defining some values that you can store it into the memory while running the Ansible and reuse it whenever we want. And task section is the one in which we will tell what exactly is the configuration that it has to maintain by calling some particular modules, isn't it? So that way, if you're trying to write a particular playbook, the first section is the target section. And in the target section, we were saying that every file that you create basically has to end up with a YML format, and in which the target section will look something like this. To begin with the file, we will first say 3 hyphens and then followed by the name of the host what you have to use for the target section. So begin with hyphen host and what is the pattern of the machine that you want to use, and followed by what is the user account or the common account using which the Ansible has to connect to all the nodes and maintain the configuration. And then do we have to do a sudo? Suppose if there are some commands or any installations which we have to do and it requires sudo, then we will be giving the option as sudo s. And what is the mode of connecting? It is the default one, which is SSH. And followed by that, do we want to gather the facts out of it? Yes or no is what we are going to say. So this is what you will be putting up in a particular file. So you can name a file anything, but it should always end with a .yml. And to run this, we will use Ansible playbook as the executable, followed by the name of the playbook. So that now whatever the instructions that you have given inside this playbook, it is going to execute line by line, and you will be getting the results based on that. So here we had already created last time, if you remember, where this was the initial initial content on how you define the target section. And once you have defined the target section, the next thing what we will be using is the task section. Okay, so in the task section, now you will always begin with the keyword called tasks, and then followed by each task will be having a name and a corresponding action according to it, where the name is just a string which represents what exactly you are running, and followed by that you will be having an action which will tell what is the module that you want to use and what exact action that you want to do. So here in this example, we were saying we are going to call a module for yum package to install the Apache in our machine. So that is how we will be using the yum as the module name, and the name of that will be httpd, and the state is installed, which means if httpd is not installed on a particular machine, it is going to install it automatically every time it is going to run it. So this is what we were seeing in the last class. And just to check that, if I want to run this, I'll simply say Ansible playbook and the name of the particular YAML file or the playbook. So now here you can see that it is trying to connect to all the machines under the group called demo, in which we had given only one machine. And for each of the machine that you are going to get or match in the group, it is going to run this task, where it is just giving the name of the task what you are doing, and in that it is trying to run. And since we already have the Apache installed on this machine, it is trying to show as green color, which means there's nothing done. The same thing in case if we had uninstalled it, let's say sudo yum and remove httpd. So here I have removed the httpd from this machine. Now if I rerun it, this time you can see it is going to install, for which it will be displaying it in the yellow color. So because of which now it has installed. So yellow color represents that the playbook was executed, where the Ansible has done some changes on the machine to maintain the state. Whereas if there is nothing it has done, then it will be showing it in the green color. Okay, so that is what we were trying to see to understand the playbook. Now, the next thing what we saw is, we saw if there is a need for us to use a variable. So that is how you will be creating a variable which will be storing some value, and that can be retrieved whenever we want. So that way, now the first way of defining the variable is, you can create a variable section, and inside that you can try to assign a value and use it by default. So this way, if you want to use this particular variable, we will say what? In the brackets or the flower brackets, the name of the variable which it will be taking it up. Or the other way that we can do is, I can include a file, and in that file we can define a value, so that when you include the variable file, rather than storing everything here, if there is a common variables which has to be used across two playbooks, then you can store everything into the file and you can include that file, so that instead of the variable option you will be using variable files, and in this you are going to define this particular variable whatever that you're going to use. So now what we will do is, let's create a file called vars as of now, which we don't have, and in that let's create a variable and whatever value that you want to pass. So now here, if you see, on our current directory we have a file called vars.yaml, and in that I have given a variable called pkg or package name and the value of it, and that is being included here under the variable section. So now when you run the playbook, it will read all the content from this particular file, and it will add all these things here, and from that it is going to read this value. So this is how the other way of calling a variable by not hard coding everything directly. So once again, if I run Ansible playbook and against this new file, what it is going to do, it is going to now get the value of the variable from this particular file. Okay, so that is another way where you can try to get the value from a particular file, in case if you have more than one playbook which is sharing the same values, then you can keep it as common and you can include it wherever you want, like this. Okay, So this is where pretty much we had stopped in between, right? Now, the other way or the third way of getting a variable is from the user. Now, let's take a scenario where you are running Ansible and you want to prompt the user to enter some value. So those kind of scenarios, now you can use the vars underscore prompt, where if you give the name of a variable and what is the prompt message that you want to give, then this will be prompted when we run the Ansible playbook, and whatever the value that we store will be stored with respect to this name here inside the playbook. Okay, so just the difference here is if I open the YAML, okay, so in this, rather than giving the file, now I'm going to put this. So first thing is alignment and indentation. Okay, so now here what I'm saying is, when the Ansible runs, we need to prompt the user with this value, wherein this is nothing but the name of the variable that we want to take from the user. So here I can say pkg name, and in this it is going to ask you the message whatever that you put here. So if you put in some message, the same thing is what it will be asking the user. So you can say enter the package to install. Okay, so this is the message I'm giving. Now when you try to run the playbook, so you can see the first thing it is asking us is to enter the value whatever that I've given in the prompt. Okay, so whatever that you give here will be stored internally under this particular variable name. So that is how the prompt here is going to show you the message. So whatever that you enter in the prompt will be displayed on the screen while running Ansible, and whatever the value that you pass here will be stored into the variable name that you have defined here. So that is how, if needed, we can use a variable directly, or you can specify it into a separate file, or you can ask the user by prompting a value to enter while running Ansible. So that is how you can use different options based on how we need to get the value. Getting it? So this is where in the last class that when we are trying to go through, we were just seeing it bit by bit. Clear on this? Hari, Karnakar, Nagesh, Vinay. Okay. Now, these are the important three sections that we have in a playbook. But in addition to this, we also have certain more sections. So that what we call it as a handler section. Okay. So what is the handler section? Now, let's take a scenario where if I want to start the service. Okay. So here, what is the package that I've, or the playbook that I have written? So I've written basically it will connect to this machine which is available in the group, and for that machine it will try to pretty much install the Apache package. So this is what we have seen, right? Now for some purpose, let's say after this, if you want to start the service, because installing a package doesn't mean that you're going to start the service. So if you want to start the service, once again, you have to create a new particular task, and in that you will be giving exactly what is the service name, because in the previous session when we are talking about ad hoc commands to work on a service to start or stop, we used a specific module called service, and in that you will give the name of what service you want to work and what is the state that represents whether you have to start it or stop it or restart. So that way, now let's take this example, and here let's try to add one more task. So this is one task, and along with it let's add one more task. Okay, so now here when I'm adding one more task, again we have to follow the same indentation, okay, which is more important, and then here we are also going to give a hyphen that represents that it is a new task. Okay, and now this is one task where we are trying to install Apache, and after that we have another task which calls to start the service for the Apache. So I'm using the module called service and I'm trying to restart the Apache. So this is what we are going to do. Now let's try to run this and see what happens. So this is where we have, right? So now you can see the content here, and here we'll say Ansible playbook and followed by the name of the playbook. So it is asking us the name as we have given here. So if I give this, it is going to install, where for whatever machine that you have chosen, first it is running this particular task and then it is coming and trying to run this, where first is the package already installed. Yes, it's already installed. That is what it doesn't have to do anything. And then it is checking whether the service is running. If it is not running, then it is going to restart it. Okay, but if I rerun it again, you can see every time it is running the restart. Now, what if we had a scenario where if the package is already installed, we know that the service would also be parallelly started with it. And every time, just like how it is saying that in green color, we also want this to be triggered or not based on only if that particular package has been available or not. So that is when, if you want to have some kind of dependency where only if this task is executed, then the following task has to be run, then you can give it under a section called handler. So handler means basically you can have a ability to call another task only if a particular task is completed successfully. Okay, again, when I say successfully, it's not just about running it, but it has changed the state of the machine respectively. So that is how you can try to use another section called handler, in which the only thing that we are going to do is, if I give it everything together like this, what will happen? For all the machines that you're going to match, Ansible will run first this step on that machine and then it will come down and run. But what we need is, now we do not want this task to be always run, because only if this task has been executed successfully and it has installed, only then you have to start. Suppose if it is not been done, then this should also be not called. So for this, what we can do is simply add a section called as handler. Okay, and whatever tasks that you want to get called as part of that, you can put it under the handler section. Now here, this particular task, I want to get it executed only if this gets called successfully. So that way, now this complete task, we can put it under a handler section. Okay, so now what will happen is, whenever you are trying to call this task and if it runs successfully, then it will try to call this and run. But how is that you're going to call after this? So that is when here you're going to specify a keyword called notify and the name of the task that you want to call. So here, let's say I give notify and the name of the particular task that you want to do. So here what it is going to do, now when you have given it this way, Ansible will first execute this, and in case if it has successfully ran it by installing the Apache service, then it will call this, which is specified in the notify. And when it calls this particular task, that task under the handler section will get called and it will be trying to run the service. If not, suppose if the package is already installed and Ansible is not executing this, then it will never call this particular task. Okay, so that is how you can specify when a task should be called, that is after a task has been completed successfully, in case you have a dependency. So now after adding this handler, if I run the same thing, you can see now after the install HTTPD, it's not at all going to the next particular task. That is because we have put it under a notify, where this will call or notify this particular task only if this particular previous task is get executed successfully. Now let's try to do the reverse. So what we will do, we will try to remove the HTTPD and then try to run the same thing. So now here, since Apache is not installed on this machine, this task will get executed, and because of that, it will call or notify the other task, that is the service task, and that will get called automatically. You can see now it is trying to run the task, and once that is completed, it is trying to call or notify the handler, and this is the name of the task which we are trying to call, and based on that it will be trying to run the service. So once again, if you run, the package is already installed, so nothing to do with respect to that. You can see it is not at all calling the handler section or the tasks that we have given under the handler section. So this is how you can create a dependency on when exactly that you want to call another task, wherein after completing a task, if it is successfully modified some changes or the configuration on whatever machine that you have given, then whatever is the handler task subjected to it, it will get invoked and it will be running it. Getting it? And what is the handler section? Is that clear? Others? Okay. So now, when you go to an organization and we are trying to write a playbook, now you have to follow certain process so that you can easily define and start writing. So that's when you're first writing a playbook, you have to first outline on what are the steps that you're going to do and how is that you're going to do. Okay, so the same example here. Now, whatever that we have done so far, we can try to first put an outline on what is that we have to do. And then based on that, we can add more details that will be more meaningful, and the output, whatever that we are going to get, will be more easy for us to track what is happening. So that way, now let's say you have to create a playbook, and for that playbook, you are trying to install some Apache web server. So that is what your aim is. So that case, now first thing, you'll have to give the details on the web servers. That is, what are the list of servers which you have to use or install or configure and maintain. And that way you will get a list of machines, and then what is the account using which you are going to do. So for a target section, the next thing that you will say is what is the account using which you are going to run this playbook. And then, do you require sudo? Yes, then you will be giving the details based on that. And in addition, let's say now when I'm running a command, I basically want to start tracking or logging everything. So that way, I would like to know what is the start time and end time. Okay, so maybe I should do something additional through which I can get some date and timestamp of when the playbook has started running. And then we will go ahead and install the Apache server, and based on that, we will start or stop a service as we need. And in case if you want to install something in addition to it, then we will be taking it as the next step. And finally, we will try to log all the installed packages that we have on our machine, and then collect the date and timestamp once again and see exactly on how much of the time that it is taken, and all those details can be tracked using this. Okay, so this is how, when you first have a requirement, you will outline what is that you are going to do for it, and based on that, you're going to now write the playbook which will have all the specific keywords for this. Okay, so here is an example where the same thing I have written it. So what exactly it is? So this is a playbook where the first section what we have is the target section, where we are saying use all the machines that is available on the etc host file. If not, you can specify a group or a machine name here. Okay, and for that, what is the account that you're going to use? So last class we created an account or a common account called Ansible1. We will use that. Then, is the user going to be having the privilege of sudo, and you have to run everything using the sudo privilege? Then you will say yes, and gather facts. So gather facts is going to help us in gathering all the information about the particular machine. Okay, and in that, here I have given many tasks. So the first task what you have given is, I am trying to take the date and timestamp of when the playbook is starting to run some command. So that way, now I am using a operating system command directly, like user bin date. So if you run this, so it is going to give you the date and timestamp completely on when did you run. Now, if I want, I can redirect the output to a particular file called as playbook start.log, so that will have the information like this where it started. Okay, then if you want to run any operating system command, then you will be using a module or an option called as raw. So remember, until the last class, or in the last session that we were seeing, I was trying to talk about a task followed by an action for it. That is the keyword that we use. But now if you see, it is not mandatory that you should always use it. In addition, you can also use something called as a raw task. So what is the raw task or a module is going to do? Now, whatever the operating system command that you're going to give, it is going to directly run it on the machine as it is. Okay, so that way, now if you have any operating system commands that you want to execute directly, then you will be using the keyword called as raw. So raw means whatever the command that you've just given, you just take it directly and run it on the machine or on the operating system. Okay, so that is one. If you want to capture, we will be using this, and for that we will be using a module called as raw. Okay, and then once you have taken the timestamp on when it is starting, then you are going to install the actual Apache package, where after completing this, you have to start with this particular step or the task in which we are going to install Apache. Now, when you're installing Apache, now we know that I don't want to call a service every time. Instead, only when the task is actually executed, we are going to call. So that way, for this task, we are trying to give a notify here, where this is the name of another task which is defined under the handlers. So this name that you're seeing here should be the same name what you're seeing in the notify, so that after this task is completed, it will try to call this, and based on whether it is successful or not, it will try to call this particular task, and that will get executed here. Okay, so that is what we have seen. But in addition, suppose if I want, I can still install many packages to it. Or finally, as I said, one more requirement, I want to take a list of all the packages that is installed. That is what we saw. So install the Apache web server and verify if it is running, and then importantly here, log all the packages installed on the machine, right? So that is what we have to do. So to do that, we will once again use a raw module, and here in this, whatever the commands you have on the operating system level, you're going to directly execute, and the output will be stored in this particular file. Okay, and once that is done, the final thing is once again take the timestamp and try to put it into the file, so that this file has the starting timestamp and this file has the end timestamp. Okay, so this is one example where let's try to run this and see. So I'm creating a new file, and in this I'll put in the details. Okay, so now let's try to run this. What's happening? Let's see. Okay, actually I'm saving everything in another machine. Let's save it here. I'm going to create a new file, and in this I'll put the details. And now let's call this. Okay, it says that there is a syntax error somewhere. So can we see what is the syntax error here? Let's look at this. So what is the syntax error? So it is saying the error appears to be in line 1 in the second column. So if you come here, can you see where is the exact error? So there is one error, not at that line, but here, where I have not aligned everything properly. So this is one error. So let's try to run it again. You see, indentation is quite important. So now in this, whatever the tasks that you're given, it will be taking care of running everything one by one. And in that, if you go to the particular directory here, you can see all these files available. So on this machine, if you go to that, So you can see now it has created these files. So in that, the first file will have the timestamp of when did you start. So that is what we have here. So here it is started at 15:46 exactly based on this time. Then when you completed it, we take or we took the list of packages that is installed. So that is available in the installed log. So if you say installed log, you can see it is going to give you a list of all the packages that has been installed on this machine. Then finally, to store the timestamp at the end, then we are going to redirect this into a file called as playbook end. So if you see here, you have the playbook end.log, and that will have all the information with respect to when it completed. So that is how, before writing any playbook, you try to first segregate it by putting an outline on what you have to do, and based on that we can start writing the particular playbook. Getting it? Is that clear? Handler. Okay, we almost came here. See, when you are trying to run a task, if you give one after the other, what will happen? Regardless of whether you have necessity to run it, as soon as you complete the first task, it is going to run the second task. So that now, in this example here, if you can see, now the first task is to install the Apache, and the second task is to start the service of Apache. Now, when you do not want to just run both of them, and we want to run the service task only if the first installation task was triggered successfully, then you have to run. So that way, instead of giving everything in a sequential order one by one, you can add something called as a notify to a particular task, so that whenever the task is completed, it will notify or it will call another task which we will put under the handler section. So that way, only if the first task is completed successfully and Ansible has modified the state of the machine, then it is going to notify or call that particular task that we have given under the handler section, and then it will get called. So if the first task is not getting called or not completing it successfully, then it will never notify or call the other task to start the service. So that is when you have such a kind of requirement where only if one completes or one task completes, the other one has to trigger, then you can specify it as a notify and the handler section. Getting it? Okay. Now, so when you're actually working on production, the playbook that whatever we are going to write will be complex or it will be big depending on what task that we have defined in it. So sometimes you just want to see what exactly the playbook is going to do, but not to execute. So that is when you will be using an option called as dry run. So what do you mean by dry run? Dry run means without executing the steps, we are just going to list down on what are the possible things that the Ansible can do. So that is how, if you want to quickly have a dry run check on what and all it is trying to do, or if you want to check whether the playbook has written properly or is there any syntax, all those kind of checks can be done using the dry run option, wherein you are not actually executing the tasks or the command, but you're going to pretty much see on how it is going to get it called. So that is what we call it as dry run. So to run the Ansible playbook in dry run, along with the Ansible playbook and the playbook name, you just give an option called as check, so that it will not execute it, but it will just check for the syntax and do a dry run on what are the possibilities of the steps that it can do. Okay, so same thing here. Instead of running it completely, if you just add check, it is not going to really run, but it is going to clearly tell you that what and all are the steps that it is going to do and what it is going to skip. So that is how we can try to know what exactly the playbook is going to do in real, and against that what and all tasks that it is going to get called. And also, as I said, in case if you have any syntax issues, that also can be captured before actually running the playbook. So it's just like checking for the syntax and having a dry run on what exactly it is going to do. So it'll be very handy for us to use in the production, because if I run something and if it is failing somewhere, then we have to fix everything, but without knowing what exactly it is failing. So that now, if you start running it in a check or a dry run mode, it will tell you exactly what are the possibilities where it might fail or what it is going to capture and what it is doing, so that it will be easy for us to always try to check once before running it actually. Okay. Okay. Now, Hari, do you have a work now? Because I was told that we have work at 9:30.